I still remember the exact moment my wife handed me that coffee. Her smile was different that morning, like she knew something I didn't. The way her fingers lingered on the handle as she passed it to me, the way she watched my face, waiting. What happened next proved my instincts right, but not in the way I expected. My name is Bradley Thornton. I'm 42 years old, and for the last 15 years I've been a high school guidance counselor in suburban Connecticut. Not the most glamorous job, but I've helped hundreds of kids find their way through the chaos of teenage life. I'm good at reading people, at sensing when something's off. That skill saved my life on a Thursday morning in October. The woman who handed me that coffee was Veronica, my wife of 15 years. 38 years old, successful real estate agent, the kind of woman who could sell ice to Eskimos with just a flash of her perfect smile. She had auburn hair that caught the light like copper wire, and green eyes that used to look at me with love. That morning, those eyes were calculating something. Then there was Estelle Ridgway, my mother-in-law, 67 years old, retired bank manager, and professional critic of everything I did. She had moved in with us 6 months earlier after hip surgery, turning our home into her personal kingdom where I was barely tolerated as the court jester. Silver-haired, sharp-tongued, always dressed like she was heading to a board meeting even at breakfast. She had this way of looking at me like I was something she'd stepped in. When my mother-in-law collapsed 30 minutes after I switched our coffee cups, I realized I'd stumbled into something darker than I could have imagined. The coffee meant for me had found its way to her instead. The poison my wife had carefully measured, the death she had planned, had claimed the wrong victim. Or maybe, looking back now, it claimed exactly the right one. This is the story of how a simple cup of coffee revealed 15 years of secrets, a murder plot that involved my wife's real estate colleague, and a mother-daughter bond that was willing to sacrifice me for money. This is about the morning I discovered that the two women living in my house had been planning my death over casual dinners, discussing my life insurance policy between bites of lasagna, choosing my replacement while I slept beside one of them every night. But most of all, this is the story of how sometimes your instincts are the only thing standing between you and the people who claim to love you. Because when Veronica walked into my office that morning with a steaming mug and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, something deep in my gut told me that accepting that coffee would be the last mistake I'd ever make. My life looked perfect from the outside. We lived in a beautiful colonial home on Maple Street, the kind with white shutters and a wraparound porch that real estate agents call charming, and price at $500,000. 2 kids in college, both on partial scholarships. A successful wife who drove a white Mercedes and sold houses to wealthy New York commuters. Every Sunday, we looked like the ideal family at church, sitting in the third pew from the front, Veronica's hand resting on mine during prayers. But beneath that polished surface, cracks had been forming for months. Veronica had become distant in a way that felt deliberate, like she was slowly untangling herself from our life thread by thread. She worked late, showing houses 4 nights a week, sometimes not coming home until after midnight. Her phone, which used to sit casually on the counter while she cooked, now lived face down in her purse, password protected with a code she changed weekly. "Big commission coming up," she'd say when I asked about the late nights. "The Riverside property needs special attention. These clients are particular." I wanted to believe her. After 20 years of counseling teenagers through their problems, I'd gotten good at spotting lies. But it's different when it's your own wife. You see what you want to see. You explain away the new lingerie that never gets worn for you. The gym membership at a place across town when there's a perfectly good gym 2 blocks away. The way she showers immediately when she comes home, washing away the day before, even saying hello. The real thorn in my side, though, was Estelle. My mother-in-law had moved in after her hip surgery in April, supposedly just for a few weeks of recovery. Those weeks had stretched into 6 months of constant criticism. She had taken over the house like an invading army, reorganizing my bookshelf, replacing our comfortable couch with a rigid antique that nobody could sit on for more than 10 minutes, and turning every meal into a performance review of my inadequacies. "Bradley," she would say, watching me load the dishwasher, "there's a proper way to arrange plates. Didn't your mother teach you anything? No wonder you ended up in such a dead-end career." She particularly enjoyed comparing me to other men, especially the successful ones in Veronica's real estate circle. "That Colton Matthews sold 3 houses last month. 3, and each one over $1 million. Now that's ambition. That's what Veronica deserves in a partner. Colton Matthews." Even his name sounded like money. 6'2", premature silver fox look, drove a black Tesla, and always seemed to be around when Veronica needed a colleague for evening property showings. He had this way of touching my wife's elbow when he talked, leaning in close like they shared secrets. At the company Christmas party last year, I watched them dance to 2 songs while I stood by the punch bowl, Estelle beside me listing all the ways Colton's suit was superior to mine. My morning routine had become my sanctuary. I'd wake at 6, make coffee in the silence before anyone else stirred, and retreat to my home office to review student files. These kids trusted me with their problems: addiction, abuse, pregnancy scares, college anxiety. In that small room lined with thank you cards from graduates, I still felt useful, still felt like I mattered. That particular morning, October 12th, started the same way. I was reading about Trevor Jameson, a senior dealing with his parents' divorce, when I heard Veronica's heels clicking down the hallway. She never wore heels on Saturday mornings. She never came to my office before noon, and she definitely never brought me coffee. But there she stood in the doorway, wearing a burgundy dress I didn't recognize, holding a steaming mug with both hands like an offering. The morning light from the window caught the steam, creating a halo effect around her face. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married, the one who used to bring me soup when I graded papers late into the night. "Made you a special coffee, honey," she said. Her voice had that quality she used with difficult clients, sweet but calculated. "New blend from that expensive place downtown. Thought you deserved something nice." The mug was one of our wedding china pieces, the ones we never used except for special occasions. The coffee inside was darker than I usually drank, and the smell was wrong somehow. Vanilla, yes, but underneath that was something sharp, almost medicinal, like the cleaning supplies under our sink. "That's thoughtful," I said, accepting the mug but not drinking. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion. Can't a wife do something nice for her husband?" She stood there, waiting, watching, her fingers drumming against the doorframe in a rhythm I'd never seen before. Everything about this moment felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced it in the mirror. And in that instant, I knew with complete certainty that my wife was trying to kill me. My instincts screamed danger as I held that mug. In 15 years of marriage, Veronica had never once brought me coffee in my office. She despised interruptions during her morning routine, treating her pre-work preparation like a sacred ritual that couldn't be broken. Special treats weren't her style either. She believed in practical gifts, new ties for work, replacement phone chargers, things with purpose. A random Saturday morning coffee delivery was as out of character as her suddenly taking up skydiving. "Thanks, sweetheart," I said, setting the mug carefully on my desk, maintaining eye contact. "Let me just finish this email about Trevor's situation. His parents are really putting him through hell with their divorce." Her smile tightened, the corners of her mouth twitching slightly. "Drink it while it's hot, Bradley. I made it exactly how you like it. 2 sugars, splash of cream." That was wrong too. I'd switched to black coffee 3 years ago when my doctor mentioned my cholesterol. Veronica had mocked me for it, calling it my midlife crisis in a mug. She knew exactly how I took my coffee, which meant she was nervous enough to make mistakes. "I will," I promised, turning back to my computer screen while watching her reflection in the monitor. That's when Estelle's voice rang out from the kitchen, sharp and demanding. "Veronica, where's my coffee? You promised to make me that special blend. I've been waiting 15 minutes. Veronica's face flickered with annoyance, a crack in her perfect mask. Coming, Mother. She turned back to me, her voice dropping to something almost threatening. Enjoy your coffee, Bradley. I'm making Mother's now. As her heels clicked down the hallway, I lifted the mug again. The smell was all wrong. Beneath the vanilla was something that reminded me of the chemistry lab at school, the same sharp scent that clung to the science wing after experiments. My hands trembled slightly as I set it back down. 3 weeks ago, Veronica had increased my life insurance policy from $200,000 to $2 million. For the kid's future, she'd said, sliding the papers across the dinner table. With college costs these days, we need to be prepared for anything. I'd signed without reading, trusting her judgment. Last week, she'd asked detailed questions about my will, about who would handle my affairs if something happened to me, about whether my brother in California needed to be notified immediately or if it could wait. From the kitchen, I heard Estelle complaining, her voice carrying through the house like it always did. I don't know why you stay with him, Veronica. 15 years of your prime wasted on a guidance counselor. You could do so much better. Mother, please. Veronica's voice was strained, impatient. Remember that developer, Colton Matthews. Now he's someone with ambition. Did you know he just bought a vacation home in the Hamptons? Meanwhile, your husband sits in that cramped office talking to delinquents all day. Mother, just wait in the living room. I'll bring your coffee in a moment. He called yesterday, you know, Estelle continued, her voice getting louder as she moved toward the living room. Colton said he had a property that would be perfect for you to list. Said he missed working with you on those evening showings. Such a professional young man, and handsome too. I stood up, carrying the mug carefully, my decision crystallizing. The coffee sloshed gently against the china, still steaming, still carrying that wrong smell that made my nose burn. I walked to the living room where Estelle had settled into her favorite chair, the antique monstrosity she'd insisted on buying with our money. She was examining the family photos on the mantel with her typical disdain. These pictures make you look heavier than you are, Bradley, and older. Veronica should have hired a better photographer. Colton knows an excellent one, did their company headshots last month. Estelle, I said calmly, setting my mug on the coffee table beside her identical empty one. The china made a soft clink against the coaster. Veronica asked me to bring this to you. She's making mine fresh. Said yours was the priority, as always. Her eyes lit up with satisfaction, that familiar gleam of superiority she got whenever she felt properly valued. Finally, someone recognizes my importance in this house. It's about time Veronica remembered who helped with the down payment for this place. I watched as she reached for the mug, her weathered fingers wrapping around the handle. Part of my conscience flickered, a voice asking if I was really going to let this happen. But then I remembered every cruel comment, every comparison to better men, every time she'd tried to convince Veronica she'd married beneath her. My silence felt justified, even necessary. At least she remembers how I like my coffee, Estelle said, lifting the mug to her lips. Though knowing Veronica, she probably got it wrong anyway. The girl never could follow simple instructions. Estelle, I said, watching her lift the mug to her lips. Veronica mentioned she made it extra special today, some new vanilla blend from that boutique downtown. She paused, examining the coffee with suspicion. Vanilla? I prefer hazelnut, she knows that. But her need to feel prioritized won over her pickiness. Well, at least she remembered me first. She took a long, deliberate sip, and I watched her throat move as she swallowed. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears, but I kept my expression neutral, the same face I used when teenagers confessed to cheating on exams or hiding pregnancy tests in their lockers. Vanilla, Estelle said, taking another sip, though it has an odd aftertaste, metallic almost. Veronica never could make coffee properly. I taught her everything about cooking and hosting, but she never paid attention to the details. While Estelle continued drinking, I pretended to check my phone, scrolling through emails I wasn't reading. My hands were steady now, the trembling gone. The decision was made. Whatever was in that coffee, whatever Veronica had planned for me, was now coursing through her mother's system instead. "You know, Bradley," Estelle continued between sips, "I've been thinking about your situation. Maybe it's not too late for you to make something of yourself. Colton could probably use someone to handle paperwork at his firm. Filing, answering phones, that sort of thing. It would be entry-level, of course, but better than wasting your psychology degree on troubled teenagers who will probably end up in prison anyway." I stood up slowly. "That's thoughtful of you, Estelle. I should get back to my work now." "Work?" she scoffed, draining half the mug. "Reading sob stories from children who can't handle basic life challenges. When I was their age, we didn't need counselors. We had discipline and common sense." I returned to the kitchen just as Veronica emerged from the pantry with another mug. Her face was flushed, and there was a slight tremor in her hands that hadn't been there before. "Where's your coffee?" she asked immediately, her eyes scanning the counter, then my empty hands. "Left it in the living room with Estelle," I said casually, opening the refrigerator to get orange juice. She was complaining about waiting, so I gave her mine. "Figured you wouldn't mind making another. You don't mind, do you?" The color drained from Veronica's face so quickly I thought she might faint. The mug in her hands shook, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "You gave it to Mother? Is there a problem?" I asked, pouring juice into a glass, keeping my voice innocent and confused. "It's just coffee, right? The same special blend you were making for her anyway?" "No, I mean, yes, it's just," she stammered, setting the mug down with a clatter. "Mother has specific preferences. She doesn't like vanilla. She prefers hazelnut." "She seemed to be enjoying it when I left," I said, taking a sip of juice. "Was going on about Colton's job opportunities as usual." Veronica's hand flew to her phone, then stopped. Who would she call? What would she say? She looked at me, and for the first time in months I saw real fear in her eyes. "Bradley, I need to check on Mother," she said, already moving toward the living room. "That coffee was, it might have been made with expired milk, I just remembered." "Expired milk?" I followed her, maintaining my confused husband act. "You just bought milk yesterday, I saw the receipt." She wasn't listening anymore. She practically ran to the living room, her heels catching on the carpet runner in the hallway. I stayed close behind, my phone ready in my pocket, 911 already typed into the keypad. Estelle was still in her chair, but something was wrong. The mug was on the floor, coffee spreading across the Persian rug she'd insisted we buy. Her face was gray, and she was clutching her chest, her breathing rapid and shallow. "I feel dizzy," Estelle gasped, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "My chest hurts. Veronica, something's wrong." Veronica dropped to her knees beside her mother, her perfect composure finally shattering completely. "Mother, stay with me. Just breathe. Everything's going to be fine." But we all knew it wouldn't be fine. The coffee meant for me was doing its work, just in the wrong body. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, my voice steady and clear as I reported the emergency. "My mother-in-law appears to be having a cardiac event. She's 67 years old, conscious but in distress. We need an ambulance immediately." As I gave our address to the dispatcher, I watched Veronica cradle her mother's head, tears streaming down her face, her carefully applied makeup running in dark rivers. She looked up at me, and in that moment we both knew that everything had changed. The perfect wife, the perfect crime, the perfect plan had all come undone with a simple switch of coffee cups. Estelle collapsed completely, her body sliding from the chair onto the floor despite Veronica's attempts to hold her. The convulsions started immediately, violent spasms that made her entire body rigid. Her eyes rolled back, showing only white, and foam appeared at the corners of her mouth. The smell of coffee mixed with something acidic filled the room. Veronica screamed, a raw sound that came from somewhere deep and primal. She dropped beside her mother, trying to hold her still, but Estelle's body wouldn't stop shaking. "Mother, no, 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 this wasn't supposed to happen." I stayed on the phone with the dispatcher, giving updates in a calm, professional voice. "She's having seizures now. Yes, she was drinking coffee. Yes, we still have the cup. No, I don't know if she takes any medications." Veronica turned to me then, her face a mask of rage and devastation. Mascara ran down her cheeks in black streams. "You knew," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of sirens growing closer. "You knew, and you let her drink it." "Knew what, Veronica?" I asked, maintaining eye contact while keeping the dispatcher on the line. "That my loving wife was trying to poison me? That you and Colton have been planning this for months?" Her expression shifted from grief to shock, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find words. "How did you know about Colton?" "Your phone syncs to our shared cloud, sweetheart. Every text, every email about the insurance money, about your plans to run away together after your grieving period. I've known for 3 weeks." The paramedics burst through the door before she could respond. 2 of them immediately went to work on Estelle, checking vitals, administering oxygen, preparing injections. A third noticed the spilled coffee, the strange white residue visible where the liquid had pooled. "We need to test this," he said to his partner, pulling on latex gloves. "Could be poisoning. What was in this coffee, ma'am?" Veronica couldn't speak. She sat on the floor, holding her mother's hand while the paramedics worked. I answered instead. "My wife made it special this morning. Vanilla blend," she said. "It was meant for me, but my mother-in-law drank it instead." The paramedic looked between us, understanding dawning on his face. "We need police here," he said into his radio. "Possible attempted homicide." Detective Ruth Hawthorne arrived 20 minutes later, a tall black woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. By then, Estelle had been rushed to the hospital, unconscious but alive, and Veronica sat in the living room, no longer crying, just staring at the coffee stain on her mother's precious rug. "Mr. Thornton," Detective Hawthorne said after surveying the scene, "I need you to tell me exactly what happened this morning." I handed her a folder I'd retrieved from my office safe. Inside were printed emails between Veronica and Colton, dating back 6 months. Planning my death, discussing the insurance money, even debating methods. There were text messages about making it look like suicide, about my supposed depression over work stress. There was even a receipt for sodium azide that Veronica had purchased online, shipped to Colton's address to avoid suspicion. She was going to frame it as a suicide, I explained, watching the detective flip through the pages. Make it look like the stressed guidance counselor couldn't handle the pressure anymore. The coffee was supposed to be my last drink. She'd find me in my office, call 911 in hysteria, play the grieving widow perfectly. Detective Hawthorne studied the evidence, then looked at Veronica. "Mrs. Thornton, I'm going to need you to stand up and put your hands behind your back." Veronica stood slowly, mechanically, like a robot following commands. As the detective read her rights, she looked at me with eyes I'd never seen before, cold and empty of everything except hate. "Mother was right about one thing," she said, her voice flat and emotionless. "You really are nothing special. A nobody who wastes his life on other people's children while real men build empires." "Maybe not," I replied, thinking of all the kids I'd helped over the years, all the thank you cards lining my office walls. "But I'm alive, and I'm free. That's special enough for me." The detective led her out in handcuffs, past the neighbors who had gathered on their lawns, past the perfect garden she'd maintained to impress buyers, past the Mercedes she'd never drive again. I watched from the doorway as they put her in the police car, her head turning one last time to look at the house where she'd planned my murder over morning coffee. Later that day, they arrested Colton at his luxury apartment, finding more evidence of their plan. including a draft of the suicide note they'd planned to leave in my handwriting. He'd been practicing my signature for weeks, getting ready for the performance of his life as the supportive friend comforting the widow. Estelle survived, but the sodium azide had caused permanent nerve damage that left her unable to speak. The doctors said it was a miracle she lived at all. The dose Veronica had measured out was meant to kill a 180-pound man quickly and decisively. In her mother's smaller, frailer body, it had moved slower, giving the paramedics just enough time to save her life, but not enough to prevent the lasting damage. She moved to an assisted living facility in Stamford, one of those places with cheerful yellow walls and nurses who speak in gentle voices. I visit her every week, not out of forgiveness but out of duty. She sits in her wheelchair by the window, and when she sees me, her eyes fill with something that might be fear or might be understanding. We'll never know. The woman who spent years cutting me down with her words now can't form a single syllable. Sometimes I read to her from the thank you cards my students have sent over the years. All those kids she said would end up nowhere, who are now doctors and teachers and artists. She listens because she has no choice. Veronica got 25 years for attempted murder. The trial was swift and decisive. The evidence was overwhelming: the emails, the poison purchase, the increased insurance policy. Colton Matthews got 15 years as an accomplice. He tried to claim Veronica had manipulated him, but the jury didn't buy it. Turns out he'd been planning something similar with his previous girlfriend, who had mysteriously died in a car accident 2 years earlier. The police reopened that case. The house sold quickly, which was ironic since Veronica had always said I didn't understand real estate value. I moved to a 2-bedroom apartment downtown, closer to the school, with windows that actually open and neighbors who mind their own business. My daughter Melody came home from college the week after the trial ended. "Dad, why didn't you just leave her if you knew?" she asked, sitting across from me at my new kitchen table, a simple wooden thing I'd bought from a thrift store. "Because leaving wouldn't have stopped them," I explained, pouring her coffee from a regular pot into regular mugs. "They would have found another way. The plan was already in motion. Sometimes, sweetheart, the best defense is letting someone's evil reveal itself." "But you could have gone to the police earlier," she said, wrapping her hands around the mug like she needed its warmth. "With what? Suspicious emails? A weird feeling about coffee? They needed to act first to show their hand. I just made sure their weapon hit the wrong target. My son Ryan had a harder time processing it all. He'd idolized his mother, seen her success as proof that our family was special. "She tried to kill you," he said during one of our phone calls, like he still couldn't believe it. "Over money?" "Over $2 million and a fantasy life with another man," I corrected. "Your mother lost sight of what actually mattered. She traded a real family for an imaginary future." 6 months after the trial, I was back in my normal routine. Morning coffee made by my own hands, student meetings throughout the day, quiet evenings grading papers and updating college recommendation letters. The drama of that October morning felt like something from another life, except for the moments when I'd catch myself hesitating before accepting any drink I hadn't made myself. A fellow teacher, Denise Palmer, started joining me for coffee after work. She taught history, had a laugh that filled the entire teacher's lounge, and never once suggested I should be anything other than what I was. One afternoon she texted me, "Coffee after work? I promise it's safe." The joke should have bothered me, but it didn't. I smiled, genuinely, for the first time in months. "Only if I can watch them make it," I texted back. "Deal, you can even pick the coffee shop." We've been dating for 3 months now. She doesn't mind that I live in a small apartment or drive a 10-year-old Honda. She thinks my job matters. Last week, she sat in my office reading the thank you cards on the walls while I finished entering grades. "These kids really love you," she said. "You changed their lives." "I just listened," I replied. "Sometimes that's all people need." The thing about poison is that it only works if you drink it. It can be sitting right there in a beautiful china cup, dressed up with vanilla and cream. handed to you with a smile by someone who shares your bed, and it still can't hurt you if you don't drink it. Veronica had counted on 15 years of trust, on my habit of accepting what she offered without question. But she'd forgotten that I spend my days with teenagers, and teenagers teach you to question everything, especially when someone's being unusually nice. I still make my own coffee every morning, black, no sugar, in my small kitchen with the morning sun streaming through windows that face east. It tastes like freedom, like survival, like the simple pleasure of being alive when someone you loved wanted you dead. Some might call that nothing special. I call it everything. If you found this story compelling, please give it a like and share it with someone who enjoys true crime stories. What would you have done in Bradley's position? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of survival, betrayal, and the unexpected twists that life throws our way. Thank you for listening, and remember, trust your instincts. They might just save your life,